This is a Damien Television Productions presents. Welcome to the Are You Afraid of the Creepypasta Tales, Episode 7. Amazing World of Gumball, the Grieving. I always loved Cartoon Network. When I was growing up, it was my favorite channel to watch. Even today, it has some good shows like Adventure Time and Regular Show. One of the newest shows on the network, The Amazing World of Gumball, is a cute and mildly entertaining show. Not really my cup of tea. It's a little bit immature, but my little brother seems to like it a lot. One day, I was watching Adult Swim when I realized that I'd been up so late I hadn't even kept track of the time. It was already 4 a.m. I don't recall ever watching AS this late as Adult Swim, so I stayed up awake to see what would happen when it ended. A little bumper showed up at the bottom of the screen during a commercial break. It said that the special episode of Amazing World of Gumball was about to come on. I was a little confused about an episode of a very popular new show coming on this early, but I was bored and decided I would watch it, thinking it might come on later on the day, so I could spoil it to my brother. Sorta mean, I know. The flashy and energetic intro played, although it was played a little differently than I recalled. The music was a little different, and the show's logo wasn't animated. Its colors were done rather sloppy as well, something a little kid would do on a doodle board or a glow board. I ignored it, assuming it was done just for this special episode. The title of the episode was called The Grieving. A sort of a sad title, but I didn't really pay too much attention. It began with Gumball, a show's 12-year-old protagonist, standing alone and facing a corner of this dimly lit classroom. He looked absolutely miserable, a far cry from the cheerful demeanor he usually had. There was no one else in this room, not even his best friend and adopted brother, Darwin Goldfish. And the windows in the room clearly showed the night sky outside. I was really starting to get confused. Why would he be at school at night? And why was he standing in the corner all sad and alone? After about what seemed to be a minute of Gumball standing somberly in the corner, the scene suddenly changed. We were in Gumball's house once again. The scene is silent, a little disquieting. Richard, Gumball's enormous rabbit father, walks in from the kitchen, and he looked even more miserable than Gumball had in the previous scene. Richard isn't wearing his usual attire. He is dressed in a fancy black suit, a little uncharacteristic of him, and as he usually a slob, he sighs and slops down onto the sofa and starts sobbing intensely, sounding like someone who just had lost something important. I was starting to get a little creeped out. And where was the silly, fun cartoon I was usually looking forward to watching with my younger brother? This was something completely different. I was thinking that this might have been something the creators did as experiments or something. A test of the animation or sound, perhaps. Though it could have been, aside from the opening theme, which was still different from the final show. The episode had been much quieter than it usually was. Only subtle sounds and very little music. And the animation was not anything to write home about either. It was done a bit like an amateur Flash on Newgrounds. The character designs were somewhat sloppy and brush-looking. The real-life backgrounds used for the show would look different. As confusing and somewhat frightening as it was, for some reason I kept watching it. Poor Richard was still sobbing in the sofa as the front door opened suddenly, making me jump a little bit at such a loud noise. It was Nickel, Gumball's mother, a blue cat like him, stepped in. Like Richard, she wasn't wearing any usual outfit that was in the show for some reason. She was in a black dress and wearing a pretty black hat to match. Nickel sat down on the couch to comfort her husband, although she was looking a little bit saddened to herself. By this point, Richard's crying had begun to get more pained and miserable sounding. This wasn't the normal cartoon crying on the show. This was realistic and almost depressing crying. I almost felt like sobbing myself. Finally, after seeming like hours, the sad scene at their home ended, as it shifted back to school, where we weren't in Gumball's classroom this time. We were in Principal Brown's office. Nickel and Richard were there, in their usual clothes, looking more normal and happy than they were been before, but still slightly worried. Principal Brown, however, looked extremely sad. He was quiet and summarily informed that their children, Alnius and Darwin, were not present after lunch earlier that day. They hadn't been seen all at the rest of the day. Nickel was furious at him and began spouting various insults and calls at him that I don't think I would have him make it on a more mature program like regular show. I was laughing at this because it seemed sort of funny for Nickel to flip out in this manner and start swearing like a sailor in a G-rated cartoon. But my outlook soon changed when Principal Brown told her to something else after she finally had quieted down. His eyes started to begin to tear up as he informed them that they eventually were found, but they had been not found alive. He went into graphic and nearly dissolently detail describing how their bodies were found. The parents sitting in their utter shocked. I couldn't hardly believe what was happening. How could such a cheery and fun kids cartoon could be talking a dark and twisted turn? I was considering turning the television off, but it was too scary to be left in the dark by now, nearly frozen by fear and disturbed intensely at the terrible things that he was saying. Another flashback. The scene was earlier that day, and the animation in the scenes was even worse than earlier. I don't remember it was clearly, but I think he began his recollection by saying that the school had called the police department when they first turned up missing, believing that the kids simply ran off and decided to skip school. They said it was very uncharacteristic of both Darwin and Alnius to go skipping school like delinquents. I don't know. Darwin was a little native and a bit ditzy, but he was a good kid and wouldn't have been dreamed of doing something like that. And Anna was even likely to run away. She was a straight-A student despite being only 4, which also troubled the police, seeing as a defenseless 4-year-old girl was missing, as well as an older boy. The school had been thoroughly checked, so the police started to search the heavily wooded area outside of the school. It took time for the police to discover a horrifying fate of Annelius. In a small clearing outside of the school, Annelius's head was found in a small box. Really, you would likely have expected something like that from to be shown in the show's cutesy art style, but it was nothing like that at all. Realistic blood covered the box, inside and out, while Annelius's head was done in the normal style, but was drenched in blood and some other fluids. Not all of them hers, apparently. There was a note in the box, seemingly written in her blood. It was never stated during the episode was written on a note, but it apparently led to the rest of the remains and Darwin's heavily mutilated corpse. What I remember most about the scene was how out of place it seemed. All the blood and gore from Darwin and Amos's slaughtered and dismembered remains was done in a very realistic and disturbing way. It looked like the scene had been taken from a crime scene photograph done by a professional, not something from a cartoon. The way the scene was animated was different from most of the shows as well. You may know that the characters from the series were done investedly differently animation styles, from flash animation to CGI. And I think that there's even a character done by something pulling out the chin upside down to make a face. This particularly scene wasn't like anything I had ever seen in the show before, and every little detail of Darwin's face was clearly illustrated. He looked a little like a zombie. His face was very pale, his eyes were goggled out, and by someone, and even Anus, Alan and Alias, fared no better, or what was left of her anyway. She was naked and her stomach has been slit open. Her intestines were strewn around the trees and bushes in the woods, done once again in a very morbid and realistic style. I was very ill by the time, and this time a clearly disturbing flashback has come to an end, so I quickly ran to the bathroom to vomit. I was feeling better after upchucking, so I realized that I had a good timing, had ran to the bathroom during a commercial. Then I noticed that the show had been running twice as long. It usually ran for 11 minutes, but the show episode was running about 30 minutes. By then, I was wondering if there was any information on the Grieving on IMDb or something. So while the commercials were still playing, I looked up some information about the episode on Google. Nothing came up. No information remotely similar to the plot or name of this episode exists anywhere. Now incredibly scared and wondering if anyone else was watching, I quickly dialed my brother Larry and asked him to turn on the Cartoon Network and see if he was seeing the same show that I was. He was pretty mad that I woke him up at this hour, but he's a nice guy and told me he would see for me. I thanked him and stayed on the line as the show came back for commercial break. The scene had thankfully panned away from the horrific sight of the children mutilated and back to the principal's office. I asked Larry if he saw some cartoon animal talking or crying, since that was what they were doing on my TV. To my surprise, he said that he saw nothing like that. Instead, it was a rerun of the old Looney Tunes short. In utter shock, I dropped the phone and ran over to the TV and turned it off. And as hard as I pressed the buttons, it would not shut off at all. I tried every single button to the TV to turn off, and nothing of them did a thing at all. I tried unplugging it, but nothing worked. The TV stayed on no matter what. Larry hanged up, assumed that I was playing a joke or something, I guess, and I was alone once again. The door was locked from the outside somehow, in my bathroom, and the door was locked over the bathroom door. It seemed I had no choice but to call the police, since my other family members were gone that night. It was the reason I could stay up so late to watch Adult Swim in the first place. When I horrendously dialed the number, but the phone, I accidentally dropped my cell phone to a cup of Pepsi. I was very scared. I had no choice but to finish the episode. I turned on all the lights in my room and got under the covers, hiding like my little brother does when I make him watch scary movies with me. Oh my god. I had apparently missed a little bit, but Gumball's parents were still talking to Principal Brown. So not that much. Nickel was asking him if Gumball was alright. Apparently, since she hadn't remembered him from Principal Brown told her, but what happened to Darwin and Alias, he looked slightly confused and shocked for a moment, and explained to her that he thought Gumball was out sick today, and he had spent the day at home himself with a stomach bug. Nicole screamed and wailed, Well, Richard quietly told him in a very out-of-character voice that he thought Gumball had got on the bus this morning, but it didn't seem that way. The police was called once again to search the building into the small forest of Elmore Junior High. They had found them in Miss Smillian's classroom, hanging by the noose, a blood-covered knife behind him, and blood covering his clothing. The episode ended with a shot of Gumball's dead body hanging there, and the corner fading to black. The credits rolled silently, not the usual way that Cartoon Network annoyingly airs the promo that squishes half the screen. These credits rolled unusually slow, and they weren't that fun to watch. A little creepy. Just plain white text scrolling on a black background. I only recognized Ben Brocklett's name as he was the creator of the show. The rest of the people I never heard of. The copyright notice at the end said Cartoon Network Studios 2001, which was incredibly odd, seeing as the show was new from 2011. After all that was over, the screen went to static for a split second, and then, during that, with some incredibly creepy and shocking video clips were shown between static intervals. I can still remember it all very clearly. The first was the picture of a person in a plugged doctor outfit. Those always scared me for some reason. And the way the person in the suit was filmed was just as bad. A red light. Something that freaked me out incredibly was shown over the clip. The next seemed like a video being played very quickly, over and over, of a kitten's face being squashed by a woman wearing high heels, which was strange because a so-called friend of mine sent me the picture today of a cat being stepped on and killed, similar to the kitten in the video. The last one was the one that disturbed me the most. It made me want to both cry and vomit my guts out. It was my little brother, at least a small child who looked similar to him, being shot in the face by a person who looked like my father. You could clearly see the kid's brain and blood spatter on the wall. I began to sob uncontrollably after that traumatizing clip. So I passed out. When I woke up, my door was unlocked and my TV was turned off. I went to call the police on my home phone on the kitchen and retort I had seen some disturbing things on TV and that my doors had been locked. When they arrived, they could nothing find that I remember from early this morning. My internet history was even clear. They were angry at me, and I just assumed that I had a big bad nightmare. When it was sure I hadn't, thankfully one of the officers felt bad for me and took me out for a small diner so I could recollect my thoughts. At the diner, I remembered that my family was out visiting my aunt, and they were supposed to be back by noon or so. It was already 11, so the officers and I drove back to only find a whole squad of police cars, even some government agents in my house. They explained to me that my little brother was missing, that my mother and father were major suspects. I was freaking out, and I tried to tell them that the disturbing clip of the boy who looked like my brothers being shot in the head, but they wouldn't listen. I stayed with my older brother Larry, who wouldn't believe me either, still insisting that I saw an old Looney Tunes cartoon and nothing at all creepy or weird. The cops told me that they would contact Turner Broadcasting System and could tell them about the incident. A representative of Turner Broadcasting came to my cousin's house and talked to me in private about what I had seen and experienced that night. He was very kind, but it all seemed like a little like some sort of front. After I could tell him that all I remembered, he agreed to play back the day's programming for when the incident with the disturbing Gumball episode had occurred. To my shock, all that was airing at the time was an old Looney Tunes short, nothing more, nothing less. I hysterically sobbed and moaned that I had experienced and seen was completely real, but no one listened. Eventually, I discovered that Ben Volklet had a Twitter account, so I sent a message about the episode, and this was the reply I got. One thing, how in the heck did you find out? I never ever thought I would think about that old shame again. Don't tell anyone this, Sarah. That's my name. But the amazing world of Gumball goes back further than you know. I used to have a really boring job as a teen, and I sketched little drawings of the water scene, friends. The episode you saw was never supposed to be seen by anyone but me and a few friends of mine. It was a very awful thing to do, but we made this episode as a joke. A guy from my old job, who everyone hated, lost a child to a crazed serial killer who's apparently still out there somewhere. Anyway, we made it so we could make fun of how he came to work usually, crying like a fool, which is see why Mrs. and Mr. Watson cries so much in the episode. I know I am deeply sorry for what I did, and which I tried to bury that stupid thing years ago. Literally, I went out into the countryside with my maids, dug a hole, and buried it. What I don't get, though, is how you describe the bloods and guts and stuff. We didn't have any scene with Darlin and Elias's bodies being found. All that happens in the episode is the parents are informed that the kid's being found dead and them crying like crazy. We didn't even draw anything in the episode like that at all. We're not that sick. Now, this is my theory. The lunatic who killed the man's child found the tape we buried, watched it, and heavily edited it. Then, he hijacked a local TV station near... I blocked out the name of my city. I'm paranoid enough, and it's a small town somehow, and got the episode to air on your local Cartoon Network station. However, why your brother couldn't see it, I have no idea. Why it seems you're the only one who saw it, I have no idea either. Sorry, but I just don't know. Now for the explanation have been waiting for. The clips at the end, I don't know. I don't. I'm deeply sorry from the bottom of my heart, but I don't know why those clips were aired. I just don't. I am sorry, I really am. But me and my mates are just the ones who made those scenes with Richard and Nicole cry. That's it. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I'm so deeply sorry. Best wishes, Ben Booklet, and everyone involved with the Grieving. Okay, that was The Grieving, a creepypasta based on the show that I know about that was on Cartoon Network. Wow, it was pretty good executed. I give this 10 out of 10. You know why? It was a cliched creepypasta in a very disturbing and weird way. Okay, I like that creepypasta next to the Dead Bart creepypasta and Tom and Jerry one. Okay, I hope you enjoyed episode 7 of Creepypasta. Are You Afraid of the Creepypasta Tales? Episode 8 will be next. And you know what it's gonna be? It'll be... Okay, I don't know what it is, but it might be one that you may know of. It's the Three Stooges, Dead Dunderheads. I hope you enjoyed episode 7, and I hope to see you in episode 8. Has been a Damien Lack Home Television Productions. Thank you and subscribe.